Hi everyone. Today we're going to read a short story called The Girl in the River. This is not just a short story, this is a full lesson. As we go through the lesson, read along with me. We'll read the story in short sections. After each section, I will show you some key words and some useful vocabulary. I'll explain what the words mean and how they are used in the story. Try to read the words out loud with me. Reading out loud really helps your English improve. After that, we'll look at some reading comprehension questions. Try to answer the questions first before listening to my answers. You can pause the video if you need more time. Then listen to my model answers and read them out loud with me. Your answers don't have to be exactly the same. If your answer is different but correct, that's completely fine. If you are studying with a teacher, you can check your answers together. All right, let's begin. Section 1. It was late. No one was outside. Tony decided to make it an early night. He turned the for-hire light off on the top of his taxi and turned around in the empty street. The thought of getting home to his wife and their newborn son, quick cup of tea, and then bed. No point in staying out on a night like this. Then he saw her. She stood by the side of the road, her clothes dripping wet, staring out into space like she was not there. Keywords. Make it an early night. Make it an early night. To decide to go home earlier than usual, especially because you feel tired or there is no reason to stay out. Newborn. Newborn. A baby that has just been born very recently, usually only a few days or weeks old. Dripping wet. Dripping wet. Completely wet, with water falling off clothes or hair in drops. Reading comprehension questions. 1. Who is the main character in the story? Tony is the main character in the story. 2. What is Tony's job? Tony is a taxi driver. 3. Why did Tony decide to stop working for the night? He decided to stop because it was late and there were no people outside, so there was no work. 4. What does Tony plan to do when he gets home? He plans to have a cup of tea and be with his wife and newborn son, and then go to bed. 5. What did Tony see that made him stop? He saw a young woman standing by the side of the road, completely wet. Section 2. Without a second thought, Tony pulled the taxi over to the side of the road. He looked out at her. She couldn't have been more than 18 or 19. What was she doing out with her clothes all wet? "Are you okay?" he called out to her. She turned and her eyes opened wide, like she had been woken from a dream. Tony called out again. "What happened? You're soaking wet." The girl shook her head. I fell in the river," she said, her hand reaching up to tug at her wet hair. Tony got out of the taxi and approached her. Keywords: pull over, pull over. This means to move a vehicle to the side of the road and stop, usually for safety or to speak to someone. Soaking wet, soaking wet. Extremely wet, as if the person or thing has been completely covered in water. Reading comprehension questions. 6. How old does Tony guess the girl is? He thinks she is about 18 or 19 years old. 7. How does the girl seem when Tony first speaks to her? She seems confused and distant, as if she has just woken from a dream. 8. What reason does the girl give for being soaking wet? She says that she fell into the river. Section 3. Get in my taxi, he said. I'll drive you home. I don't have any money, she said. My bag, my purse, they fell into the river. I don't even have my keys. Tony shook his head. Don't worry about money. Get in. You'll catch your death of cold standing out here like that. The girl gave Tony a weak smile and stepped into the back of the taxi. Tony asked her where she lived, and she told him. He knew the streets of London by heart. He had been a taxi driver for 5 years. He had seen some strange things, but nothing like this. Keywords: catch your death of cold. Catch your death of cold. An expression meaning to become seriously ill because you are very cold and wet for too long. Weak smile. Weak smile. A small, tired smile that shows little energy or happiness, often because the person feels unwell or upset. Reading comprehension questions. 9. What does Tony do to help her? He offers her a ride home in his taxi. 10. What does the girl say happened to her bag and keys? She says they fell into the river. 11. How does Tony respond to her lack of money? He tells her not to worry about money and lets her ride for free. 12. Why does Tony decide to help her anyway? He wants to help her because she is wet, cold, and in a vulnerable situation. 13. How long has Tony been a taxi driver? He has been a taxi driver for 5 years. 14. What does Tony think about this situation? He thinks it is strange and unusual compared to anything he has seen before. Section 4. What happened then? Tony asked her. He thought it would be a good idea to make light of the situation. You went for a swim? He could barely make out the girl's face in the back of the taxi. No, I just fell in. I just fell. They arrived at her address, and Tony stopped. I'll come to the door with you, he said. Make sure you get in okay. No, said the girl. My mother is at home. Don't worry about me. Tony shrugged. The girl went to her door, and Tony saw her knock on the door. He drove on and assumed she would be all right. Keywords. Make light of. Make light of. This means to joke about something serious in order to make it seem less important or less worrying. Shrug. Shrug. To lift your shoulders slightly to show that you do not know something or do not think it is important. Reading comprehension questions. 15. What joke does Tony make about the situation? He jokes that she might have gone for a swim. 16. How does the girl respond to Tony's question? She says that she simply fell into the river. 17. What does Tony offer to do at the girl's house? He offers to walk her to the door to make sure she gets inside safely. 18. Why does the girl tell Tony not to come with her? She says that her mother is at home and tells him not to worry. 19. What does Tony see the girl do before he drives away? He sees her knock on the door of her house. Section 5. But what a state! Who falls into the river? She was lucky nothing terrible happened. As he drove on, he glanced into the rearview mirror. It was then that he saw a pair of women's shoes. Her shoes, left on the seat, a small pool of water gathered beneath them. Tony pulled the taxi to the side of the road and turned around to look at the shoes. The girl had been in such a daze. It was like she wasn't even there when he spoke to her. Falling in the river must have given her such a shock. Maybe she had banged her head on something. Keywords. Rear view mirror. Rear view mirror. This is a mirror inside a car that allows the driver to see what is happening behind the vehicle. Pool. Pool. A small amount of liquid that collects and stays in one place, usually on a flat surface. Daze. Daze. A state of confusion where a person cannot think clearly or react normally. Reading comprehension questions. 20. What does Tony notice in the back of the taxi? He notices a pair of the girl's shoes on the seat. 21. What is strange about the shoes? They are wet and left behind, with water collecting underneath them. 22. What explanation does Tony give for the girl's behaviour? He thinks she is in shock after falling into the river. 23. What does Tony suspect might have happened to the girl? He thinks she may have hit her head when she fell into the river. Section 6. He considered just driving off, but then his conscience got the better of him. He would just take the shoes back to her house, knock on the door, and return them. Then go home. At least he had a funny story to tell his wife in the morning. He turned the taxi around and went back to the house where he had left the girl. He stopped and opened the back door and took the shoes out. Water dripped all over the seat. The whole street was empty. No sound at all. The only light was from the street lamps. Keywords. Conscience. Conscience. The inner voice or feeling that tells you what is right and wrong and makes you feel guilty if you do something bad. Empty. Empty. Having no people, movement or activity, creating a quiet and sometimes uncomfortable atmosphere. Reading comprehension questions. (24) What does Tony first consider doing? He considers driving home and not returning the shoes. 25. Why does he decide to go back? He decides to go back because his conscience tells him it is the right thing to do. 26. What does Tony plan to do with the shoes? He plans to return them to the girl at her house. 27. How does the story describe the street as he returns? The street is described as empty, silent, and only lit by street lamps. Section 7. The girl had gone to the last house on the terrace, so it was easy to remember. Tony trudged up to the door and gently knocked on it. There were 2 glass panels on the door and no light on inside. The girl had probably gone straight to bed. Tony peered through the glass, could not make out any movement. He knocked again, this time a little louder. Then he saw a little light appear at the top of the stairs. He could just make out a figure coming down to the front door. A quiet voice spoke out. "Who is it?" Key words: trudge, trudge. To walk slowly and with heavy steps, usually because you are tired or the situation feels difficult. Peer, peer. To look carefully or closely at something, often because it is hard to see clearly. Reading comprehension questions. 28. How does Tony find the house again? He remembers that it is the last house on the terrace. 29. Why does he think the girl might not answer? He thinks she may have gone straight to bed. 30. What does Tony see through the door? He sees a light appear upstairs and a figure coming down the stairs. Section 8. Tony cleared his throat. You left your shoes in the taxi. The door cracked open 2 inches. Behind the door, an old woman's face. She stared out at Tony with suspicion. "What do you want?" she said. "Oh, I'm sorry," said Tony. "I thought you were the young girl from before." He held up the pair of wet shoes. "I think your daughter left her shoes in my taxi." He smiled back at her to put her at ease but she just stared back at him with an icy gaze. "Is this some kind of joke?" she said. Keywords: suspicion, suspicion. A feeling that something is wrong or that someone may not be telling the truth. Icy, icy. Very cold in manner or attitude, showing no warmth or friendliness towards someone. Reading comprehension questions. 31. Who does Tony see when the door opens? He sees an old woman. 32. What does Tony say to the person at the door? He says that the young girl left her shoes in his taxi. 33. How does the old woman respond to Tony? She responds with suspicion and asks if it is some kind of joke. 34. What does Tony assume about the old woman? He assumes that she is the girl's mother. 35. How would you describe the woman's attitude? Her attitude is cold, suspicious, and unfriendly. Section 9. "No," said Tony. "I picked your daughter up. She was soaking wet. She said she fell in the river." The woman shook her head. She made a strange noise from deep in her throat. "Get out of here," she said. "Leave me alone." Tony's eyes flicked over the old woman's face, her wild hair, her cold eyes. "I'm sorry," said Tony, "but I saw her come to this house. I just want to return her shoes. That's all." "You are very cruel," said the woman. Keywords: cruel, cruel. Intentionally causing emotional or physical pain to someone, or showing no concern for their suffering. Wild, wild. Untidy or uncontrolled in appearance or behavior, often suggesting distress or instability. Reading comprehension questions. 36. What does Tony try to explain to the old woman? He explains that he picked up her daughter after she fell into the river. 37. What physical description is given of the old woman? She is described as having wild hair and cold eyes. 38. How does the woman interpret Tony's actions. She believes he is being cruel and upsetting her. 39. Why might the woman think Tony is being cruel? She may think he is lying or reminding her of something painful. Section 10. Tony placed the shoes on the doorstep. "I'll just leave them here," he said. He went to leave and heard a kind of growl from behind him. He turned, and the old woman was leaning against the back of the door. She looked ancient, and he could make out the inside of the house, all old and decrepit. "My daughter drowned in the river 20 years ago," said the woman. "She died. So what are you talking about? And whose shoes are these?" Tony edged slowly away from the house, away from the old woman, and away from the old decaying smell that came from inside. Key words: drowned, drowned, died because they were unable to breathe after being underwater. Decrepit, decrepit, very old and in poor condition, often falling apart or no longer safe. Decaying, decaying, slowly breaking down, rotting, or becoming worse over time. Reading comprehension questions. 40. What final thing does Tony do with the shoes? He leaves them on the doorstep. 41. What shocking information does the old woman reveal? She reveals that her daughter drowned in the river 20 years ago. 42. How does this change the meaning of the story? It suggests that the girl Tony met may have been a ghost. 43. What is Tony's reaction to this revelation? He slowly backs away from the house in fear and confusion. (44) Describe the atmosphere of the house and street at the end. The atmosphere is cold, eerie, and unsettling, with a sense of decay and something unnatural. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story and the lesson. Don't forget to download the full lesson below. You can use it for self-study or in your class with your teacher. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.